Our next guest had a front row seat to the making of the Trump economic agenda. Let's welcome Stephen Moore, former member of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board, now with the Heritage Foundation, and Arthur Laffer, a member of Reagan's economic team and a so-called father of SupplySide Economics, and both have advised, then candidate had advised Donald Trump on economic policy. Now they're co-authors of the new book, Trumponomics, Inside the America First Plan to Revive Our Economy. Stephen, Arthur, thanks for joining us. So there are, gentlemen, there's like 10 points. Did you come up with 5, Steve, and Arthur come up with the other 5, or it's a true collaboration? I'll start with you, Steve.
I stole all these ideas from Arthur. I learned my economics from Art Laffer. By the way, the other guy who was involved with us, with Arthur and I, in terms of helping Trump devise this economic formula was, of course, Larry Kudlow. And Larry, of course, is now the most important economist in the country. I think you know Larry, Joe. I think you've dealt with him a little bit.
I have. We've had some meetings of the minds in the past. You know, he says like 8 words. I finish with the last 4, vice versa. Yeah, we have finished a few sentences here and there. He wrote the foreword for the book too, didn't he, Stephen?
He did.
Hey, so Arthur, you've watched it play out. It's kind of funny for a guy that, you know, that is called the father of supply-side economics. And according to so many people, supply-side economics is total. I mean, I heard President Obama, it's been totally refuted. But here it's again, are you sure, did it work this time in your view, or is it a work in progress, Art?
Well, it's always a work in progress, Joe. I mean, but it's working beautifully. I mean, we couldn't have asked for better GDP growth. We couldn't ask for a better jobs report. All the policy metrics that are coming in are right in line with what we wanted. The tax bill is great. The deregulations, monetary policy, trade is a work in progress. And obviously, in the future, we're going to have to get spending restraint and a lot of it. But things are going very, very well, and I couldn't be happier. And Obama, he's let yesterday's news on supply-side economics. Great guy, but not very good on economics.
Yeah, Joe, you know, one of the points of the book, and we have a major chapter about Obamonomics. And look, Obamonomics, I think that Barack Obama did the best he could, but it just didn't work. And there were so many areas of the country that we went to on the campaign, you know, especially those Midwestern states like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, where they just didn't feel any kind of recovery at all, that were just completely left behind. And, you know, Obama every single year predicted that he and his economists predicted they would get 4% growth. They never came within a country mile of 4% growth. And by the way, you know, the last 6 months, guess where we are with the economy right now? Yeah. Just about 4%.
Hey, Stephen, I mean, we got to talk tariffs. And I wanted also to talk to you about just the never-Trumpers that all your colleagues, or a lot of your colleagues, that will never, I think, support Trump. They've always had the idea that deep down he's a Democrat, or I don't know, from his past or from some of his statements or for whatever reason. At this point, I mean, I look at Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. I look at, you know, he gave out, he said these are going to be the 20 I pick from. He followed through on that. And a lot of the policies are pretty conservative, aren't they? Except for tariffs, I guess. And you can comment on that, Steve.
You better believe it. I mean, look, Arthur and I have faced a lot of opposition within the party itself, within the Republican Party, when we first got behind Trump in early 2016. But, you know, he just had the right economic formula. And I always tell people, look, a lot of times Donald Trump says things that make my eyes roll, and I'm like, oh, Donald, don't say that. But, you know, when you look at the policies and the results, that's where you just have a home run. I mean, as Arthur said, who would have thought we'd be at 3.5%, 4% growth? Who would have thought we would have, you know, 7 million
Stephen,
more jobs?
Heritage and tariffs do not go together. Heritage,
no,
say heritage, and then say tariffs, and that does not go hand in hand. That's the last thing you'd associate with where you are now.
Yeah, but I feel a lot better where we are. I'm curious what Arthur thinks, but I think we're in a lot better shape today on trade than we were 6 or 9 months ago. And we got to, right, Arthur, we got this great Canada-Mexico deal.
Right. Joe, I mean, he's using tariffs to get these people to the table to negotiate freer trade. When he left the G7 meeting in Ottawa, going to Singapore to meet with Kim Jong-un, he said right to the other 6, I'm willing to go to 0 tariffs, 0 non-tariff barriers if you guys will do it right now. He is a free trader, obviously a free trader. How does he get China to the table without threatening tariffs? And, you know, that's a strategy that I'm not good at. I'm not a negotiator. But, golly, he is a good negotiator, and it looks like it's working with NAFTA, South Korea, Korea, and I think it's going to work in Argentina with Xi.
Arthur, is there a point that you get a little more concerned about the tariffs? I mean, we also hear talk of this becoming a Cold War, something that's going to last a decade or longer. Is there a point where you would say, hold on a second, this is no longer just a negotiating tactic?
Becky, there's nothing worse for the economy than a trade war. If you look at Smoot-Hawley or the administration I was in, was the Nixon administration, when we put all those protectionist measures in, the mid-'70s were horrible, 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 largely as a result of a trade war. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but it terrifies me day and night, to be honest with you. Higher taxes and trade wars are the really big killers of prosperity.
And you look, by the way, if you look at what Donald Trump is asking of China, I don't think there's anything unreasonable here. I mean, we know that they're stealing about $300 billion of intellectual property. He wants China to open up their markets to us, which would be a great thing, by the way, right, Arthur, for both our countries. If China would buy more of our stuff, we sell more. They would have more access to ours. Let's, as Arthur said, our strategy, and we're working with Larry Kudlow over at the White House, the zero tariff strategy. And look, wouldn't it be ironic if Donald Trump ended up being one of the most free trade presidents ever if we were able to pull this off?
Hey, Stephen.
Right?
Stephen, I've read you for years, and I remember reading for many years when you would rail on the issue of deficits and debt. And so my question to you is, given the additional deficit and debt that we're going into, despite the fact that we are having a nice little economic boost here, how you think about that?
Well, the spending is out of control, in my opinion, and I wish Donald Trump would veto more of these spending bills. I hope he vetoes the big spending bill that's coming down the pike in the next month or so. But look, the first meeting that Larry and I and Arthur had with Donald Trump, we laid it out, that there is no way we're ever going to make progress in reducing the deficit, the debt, poverty in America with this 1.92% growth rut we were in under Obama. We had to get the growth rate up. I feel much better about where we are with 3.5% to 4% growth in terms of, we're going to get a flood of revenues into the government next year with this additional growth. As Larry Kudlow likes to say, every 1 percentage point increase in growth gives you $3 trillion more revenue over the next decade.
Go ahead.
Dr. Laffer, I have a question for you about how you think the tax bill is impacting investment, which is what it was all about. So my perspective on this is if you look at every business cycle peak to peak since World War II, we had two where investment grew better than 9%, non-residential fixed investment, that is. The 60s and the 90s both followed supply-side tax cuts. Until 2017, we were averaging only 1.8. It's surging 6+% now in software, intellectual property, even structures where it's been so moribund. My perspective is it's having the desired effect. Can you elaborate on that?
I think it's having the desired effect. I mean, not only did we cut the rate from 35 to 21% with the pass-throughs as well, and the personal income tax rate down to 37, but 100% expensing of capital purchases. My goodness, that's 5. That increases the internal rate of return on new investments dramatically. And then we have the territoriality, which means that U.S. companies can now compete with foreign companies on foreign soil. That's the greatest thing since soap. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And you will see as the growth rates increase, and what Steve said, these tax cuts will pay for themselves, but it won't happen tomorrow morning. It takes 2, 3, 4 years before you really get net revenues increasing. But over a decade, as Steve quoted Larry Kudlow saying, 10 years, it's $3 trillion for every increase of 1%.
When are we
Isn't this the key, though, to ultimately cutting the trade deficit? Is driving investment back home?
I don't think the trade deficit is an issue. The trade deficit is foreign investment in the U.S. I may be a little different from other people in this, but I don't think a trade deficit is bad. A trade deficit is a capital surplus, and it means capital moving into the United States, providing jobs, output, and employment for Americans. And I think a trade deficit, which happened under Reagan and under Kennedy, I think that's phenomenal for the U.S.
You mentioned that issue of investment, and some economists were disappointed with the third quarter number in terms of business investment. But there's something funny about that number. I mean, if you look at the manufacturing numbers in the jobs report, if you look at the construction numbers, very positive. Everywhere I go, with Arthur, I travel everywhere from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, every city in between. I mean, you go to Nashville, you go to Denver, you go to Los Angeles, San Francisco, even Cleveland and Detroit. All you see is building cranes everywhere. I mean, we're in the biggest construction boom in the history of this country right now. I just don't see a slowdown in terms of business investing.
Year-on-year rates are still rising. That was just GDP quarter-on-quarter math. It's still going up.
The one thing, Art, that I wish you'd do more work on is the rap against supply side or trickle down is that it benefits the top. And you know, when you're growing the pie,
yes,
that's the only thing that you can control. That's the only thing you can do is grow. When you do the redistribution and the pie shrinks, you feel good that you're doing something, but then the Fed's got to stay at zero because your growth policies are so bad. But it doesn't seem. I wish there was a way the free market would redistribute things itself, and maybe it is with wage gains that we're seeing now, Art.
Joe, let me just, I'm going to quote my old friend, our old friend, Jack Kemp. You can't love jobs and hate job creators. And if you don't make it worthwhile for the upper income people to do the investing and increase output and increase employment, you're never going to get wages rising like they're rising now.
Counterintuitive,
if you think that,
though.
it is counterintuitive.
Hey,
but,
Art, though,
I've never been employed by a poor person.
How do you feel about the CapEx number, the most recent CapEx number? You would not think there is real capital expenditures taking place right now. As a function of...
That was the point I was making. It's like, just look, open up your two eyes and look at what's going on around the country. I mean, everywhere you go is construction cranes, building, warehouses, factories, apartment buildings, everywhere. It's unbelievable.
Stephen, the math does not suggest that the capital expenditures you would have thought there would be relative to what the tax cuts demonstrated.
Oh, I'm happy with the numbers. I mean, what are we year over year? Larry just announced these numbers last week. We're over, I think the numbers were out there 6 or 7%. That's a healthy number for business investment.
Your numbers are really strong.
All right. Thank you, Stephen Moore.
You guys have altogether too much fun.
Yeah, well, that's true. You know what? There's a lot of things I ain't never done, but I ain't never had too much fun, Art. That's a song.
Get the book, guys. Stimulate the economy.
Supply-side tax cut on fun.
Trumponomics. Trumponomics. I'm going to put this under my pillow, and I just want it to seep into my brain. It's out right now. Stephen Moore and Arthur Laffer.
Thanks, guys.
When we come back, will it be in November to